Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore new ideas.
Well, today we're diving into a book that's taken the world by storm. Mel Robbins' The 5-Second Rule.
Yeah, the 5-second rule. That was
Hmm?
definitely made the
I
rounds.
have to admit, I went into it a little skeptical, another self-help book, but I was so wrong. Robbins' style is so relatable, and the science behind the rule is fascinating.
Right. And it's so practical. It's not just theory. It's something you can actually use in your daily life.
That's what really hooked me. Okay, so for those who haven't read the book, the basic premise is that you can use a simple 5-second countdown, like a rocket launch, to overcome hesitation and take action.
It's like tricking your brain into bypassing all those doubts and fears that hold you back.
And Robbins has this hilarious story about how she came up with the rule. She was struggling to get out of bed one morning, saw a rocket launch on TV, and had this epiphany. If a countdown can launch a rocket, maybe it could launch her out of bed too.
And it worked. It's amazing how such a simple technique can actually rewire our brains.
Well, our brains are wired to avoid discomfort and seek safety, right? So we hesitate, we overthink, we procrastinate. That 5-second countdown is like a shortcut to break free from that pattern.
It's like interrupting that automatic no before it even has a chance to form.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, this rule isn't just about getting out of bed. Robbins applies it to all sorts of situations.
Oh yeah, all kinds. Public speaking,
Yeah.
asking someone out, starting a new project.
Even making those tough decisions we tend to put off.
Robbins argues that we spend so much time waiting to feel ready, but that perfect moment rarely comes. The 5-second rule is about taking action before you feel ready, because that's often when the magic happens.
I love how she uses the rule to explain how some of the world's most famous inventions were created, like matches and Velcro.
Imagine if those inventors had just dismissed those initial sparks of inspiration. They acted on those hunches, and the world is a better place for it.
Robbins calls these aha moments and encourages us to pay attention to those intuitive nudges.
Sometimes, the best ideas come to us in the most unexpected ways. The key is to capture those fleeting thoughts and use the 5-second rule to transform them into something real.
But let's be honest, sometimes those aha moments lead to procrastination. We all do it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Robbins dedicates a whole section of the book to the science of procrastination.
And she makes this interesting distinction between what she calls destructive procrastination and productive procrastination.
Destructive procrastination is what we typically think of avoiding tasks we know we should be doing. But productive procrastination, on the other hand,
Can actually be a good thing, especially for creative projects.
sometimes stepping away from a problem can give our subconscious minds time to work through it and come up with innovative solutions.
I never thought of it that way, but it makes sense. It's not always bad to procrastinate, right? It's more about recognizing why we're doing it and if it's helping or hindering us.
Exactly. And Robbins gives some great strategies for overcoming that destructive procrastination, like breaking down big tasks into smaller chunks.
It's amazing how much easier it is to get started when you don't feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the task.
She tells this great story about a PhD student who was completely paralyzed by the thought of writing his dissertation.
Oh, I can relate.
He started using the 5-second rule to just start working, even if it was just for 5 minutes at a time.
Did it work?
It made a huge difference. Not only was he more productive, but his stress levels went way down. It's about taking action, even when you don't feel like it.
It's like that old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But sometimes, even taking that first step can feel impossible, especially when our emotions get in the way. And Robbins talks about that too, this idea of untangling our feelings from our actions.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. She argues that we often confuse our feelings with reality, which can lead to all sorts of problems.
So we end up making decisions based on how we feel rather than what we know is best.
Exactly. And Robbins believes that we have a lot more control over our actions than we realize, even when our emotions are running high.
And she has this fascinating analogy about a near-miss car accident to illustrate this point. Imagine you're driving along, and suddenly a car swerves into your lane. You feel that surge of fear, your heart races, your palms sweat.
But in that moment, your mind instantly understands why you're feeling that way. You almost had an accident.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So we have that context, right? We know why we're feeling scared.
Exactly. And that understanding prevents the fear from spiraling out of control. You might be shaken up, but you take a deep breath and you keep driving.
But what happens when we don't have that clear context? Like when we're feeling anxious about a presentation or a social event?
Well, sometimes our bodies react as if we've had a near miss. even when there's no real danger present.
So our heart starts pounding, our palms get sweaty, but we don't know why.
Right. And without that clear explanation, our minds start searching for reasons to justify those feelings. We might latch onto thoughts like, I'm going to mess this up, or everyone's judging me.
And those thoughts just amplify the anxiety.
Exactly. It becomes a vicious cycle.
So how do we break free from this cycle?
That's where the 5-second rule comes in. Instead of getting swept away by those anxious thoughts, you can use the countdown to interrupt the pattern and redirect your focus.
It's like hitting the pause button on your emotional autopilot.
Exactly. You can use those 5 seconds to take a deep breath, focus on a positive affirmation, or remind yourself of a time when you succeeded in a similar situation.
And Robbins makes this really interesting point that the physical sensations of anxiety and excitement are actually very similar. It's our interpretation of those sensations that makes the difference.
That's so true. It's like those butterflies you feel before a big presentation. You can choose to interpret them as fear or as excitement.
So it's not about pretending you're not nervous. It's about reframing those feelings into something that empowers you rather than paralyzes you. And she even uses this technique with her kids.
I remember that story. She helped her son overcome his fear of sleepovers by telling him to reframe his anxiety as excitement for all the fun he was going to have.
And it worked. It's amazing how much power our minds have over our emotional experiences.
It's a great reminder that we're not at the mercy of our emotions. We can choose how we want to respond to them. And sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is simply acknowledge those feelings, embrace them, and then choose to act in spite of them.
And that leads us perfectly into Robin's ideas about confidence. She makes this bold statement that confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build through acts of courage.
I love that concept. It means that confidence is accessible to everyone. It's not some magical quality that some people have and others don't. It's a skill, a muscle that gets stronger with practice.
So it's not about waiting until you feel confident to take action, it's about taking action to create the confidence.
Exactly. And Robbins emphasizes that every time we step outside our comfort zone, even in small ways, we're making a deposit in our confidence bank.
I love that analogy. It's like we're building up this reserve of self-belief that we can draw upon when we need it. And Robin shares this incredible story from her own life about pushing herself to approach the CEO of Cisco at a conference.
She was terrified, right?
Yeah.
But she used the 5-second rule to overcome her hesitation, and it led to a fantastic conversation and a huge confidence boost.
It's a great example of how taking that first step, even when it feels scary, can open up incredible opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, I think we need to take a quick break before we delve into how the 5-second rule can help us not only conquer our fears, but also deepen our relationships and unlock our true potential.
Welcome back. Ready to dive back in?
I am. I'm really intrigued by this idea of confidence and how the 5-second rule can help us build unshakable self-belief.
Yeah, Robbins has some really interesting insights about that. She kind of flips the script on how we typically view fear.
In what way?
Well, we usually see fear as this negative thing, something to be avoided at all costs. But Robbins argues that fear can actually be a sign that we're on the right track.
Wait, so she's saying we should embrace fear?
In a way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
She points out that fear often shows up when we're pushing ourselves outside our comfort zones, when we're stretching and growing.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Not at all. Robbins even goes as far as to say that if you're not feeling any fear, you might not be aiming high enough.
Okay, that's a new way of looking at it. So how do we actually shift our perspective on fear? How do we go from feeling afraid to feeling empowered?
That's where the 5-second rule comes in handy. It's like a tool to interrupt those fear-based thought patterns and redirect your focus to something more positive.
So instead of getting caught up in those what-if scenarios, those worst-case scenario thoughts, we can use the 5 seconds to break free from that spiral.
Exactly. It's about catching yourself in that moment of hesitation and using the countdown to shift gears.
Robbins has this really cool analogy about the physical sensations of anxiety and excitement. She says they're actually very similar. It's our interpretation of those sensations that determines whether we label them as fear or excitement.
That's such a powerful concept. It means that we have more agency over our emotional experience than we often realize.
So we can actually choose to reframe those butterflies in our stomach as excitement instead of fear.
Exactly. It's like a mental Jedi mind trick. And Robbins uses this technique all the time, especially when she's about to speak in front of a large audience. She reminds herself that those nerves are actually a sign that she's energized and ready to go.
So it's not about denying or suppressing those feelings. It's about recognizing them and choosing how we want to respond to them.
Exactly. And she even uses this approach with her kids. She tells this funny story about how she helped her son overcome his fear of sleepovers by encouraging him to reframe his anxiety as excitement for all the fun he was going to have.
And it worked?
It did. It's a great example of how we can use the power of our minds to transform our emotional experiences. And this ties in beautifully with Robin's message about confidence. She argues that confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build through acts of courage.
It's like confidence is a muscle that gets stronger the more we use it.
Precisely. And every time we step outside our comfort zone, every time we face a fear and take action
Yeah.
despite it, we're making a deposit in our confidence bank.
I love that analogy. It's like we're building up this reserve of self-belief that we can draw upon when we need it most.
And Robin shares some incredible stories from her own life about how she's used the 5-second rule to create these confidence breakthroughs, like that time when she pushed herself to approach the CEO of Cisco at a conference.
Yeah, that was a great story. She was so intimidated, but she used the 5-second rule to overcome her hesitation and ended up having this amazing conversation, and it gave her such a boost of confidence.
It's a perfect example of how taking action, even when we feel scared, can lead to incredible opportunities and growth. It's like that old saying, feel the fear and do it anyway.
But sometimes it's easier said than done, right? We might know that taking action is the best thing for us, but we still get stuck in those cycles of fear and self-doubt.
And that's where Robbins emphasizes the importance of having those anchor thoughts. These are basically positive affirmations that you can repeat to yourself whenever those negative thoughts start creeping in.
It's like having a mental life raft to cling to when you feel yourself starting to drown in those anxieties.
Exactly. And they can be anything that resonates with you, a favorite quote, a mantra, even just a simple phrase like, I can do this.
So it's about creating this internal support system, this toolbox of mental strategies that can help us navigate those challenging moments. And it all comes back to this idea of taking action.
The 5-second rule is about shifting from fear to action, from hesitation to courage. It's about recognizing that we are stronger than we often believe and that we have the power to create a life we love, a life filled with purpose and meaning.
I love that. But sometimes finding that purpose and meaning can feel like a daunting task. It's like, okay, I'm ready to take action, but in what direction? All right, welcome back. Now I'm really curious to explore how Robbins applies the 5-second rule to relationships. It seems like this is where things get really interesting.
Oh yeah, relationships can be a real testing ground for courage. It's easy to let fear and insecurity dictate how we interact with the people we care about.
I know I'm guilty of that. Like sometimes I hesitate to express my appreciation or have a difficult conversation because I'm afraid of how the other person will react.
Well, Robbins really emphasizes the importance of courage in relationships, not just in those big dramatic moments, but also in those everyday interactions that really build connection.
So it's not just about grand gestures. It's about those small acts of courage that can actually deepen our bonds with others.
Yeah, things like speaking up when something's bothering you, being vulnerable enough to share your true feelings, or simply taking the time to really listen to someone.
And it's amazing how often we let fear hold us back from doing those things.
It's almost like we convince ourselves that it's better to stay silent or avoid conflict than to risk upsetting someone or rocking the boat.
But Robbins challenges us to ask ourselves, what would I do if I weren't afraid in our relationships? What kind of conversations would we have? How much more open and honest could we be?
And she shares this really powerful story about her own experience with this. Her father needed brain surgery, and she was obviously terrified.
Oh, wow. That must have been incredibly difficult.
It was. But she used the 5-second rule to overcome her fear and ask him a question that she'd been avoiding. Are you scared?
I bet that was hard to ask, but so important.
It was. And it opened up this incredible space for deeper connection and honesty between them.
Sometimes it takes courage to simply be present with someone, especially when they're going through something difficult.
Exactly. And Robbins stresses the importance of not just waiting for those big moments to express our love and appreciation. She encourages us to use the 5-second rule to create those small, everyday moments of connection.
Like what kinds of things?
It could be something as simple as sending a quick text message to let someone know you're thinking of them, writing a note of appreciation, or even just putting your phone down and giving someone your undivided attention when they're talking to you.
So it's those small gestures, those micro moments of connection that can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's about being intentional and proactive in our relationships, not just letting them coast on autopilot.
And I think it's important to note that Robbins's insights on relationships apply to all kinds of connections, not just romantic ones.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She talks about courage and friendships, family dynamics, even in the workplace. It's about showing up authentically in all areas of our lives.
And it all comes back to this idea of the power of you that Robbins talks about, this belief that we all have something unique and valuable to offer the world.
I love that concept. It's about recognizing that each of us has a treasure within us, a set of talents, experiences, and perspectives that no one else can replicate.
And it's a shame when we let fear or self-doubt hold us back from sharing those gifts with the world.
And Robbins reminds us that the world needs your contribution. It needs your voice, your creativity, your unique expression. It's not about comparing yourself to others or trying to fit into some predefined mold. It's about embracing your individuality and letting your light shine.
And that's where the 5-second rule comes in, right?
Right.
It's a tool to help us overcome those internal barriers that prevent us from fully expressing ourselves.
It's about taking action, even when it feels scary or uncertain, and trusting that the path will unfold as you go. Like Paulo Coelho says in the foreword to the book, the treasure you seek is within you. It's such a powerful reminder that we don't have to look outside ourselves for validation or fulfillment. It's already there, waiting to be discovered.
It's about trusting ourselves and having the courage to pursue the things that truly light us up, even if we don't have all the answers yet.
It's about embracing the journey and knowing that clarity will come as you go. And Robbins really emphasizes the importance of trusting your intuition, those gut feelings, those sparks of inspiration that can guide you along the way.
It's about tuning in to that inner wisdom and having the courage to follow it. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling so inspired right now.
Me too. Robbins' message is so empowering. She really makes you believe that anything is possible if you're willing to take action and trust yourself.
And that's the beauty of the 5-second rule. It's so simple, yet so profound. It's a tool that anyone can use to create positive change in their lives. So, to our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this question. What's one area of your life where you could apply the 5-second rule right now? What's one small act of courage that could make a big difference?
It doesn't have to be some grand, sweeping gesture. It could be as simple as sending that text you've been putting off, signing up for that class that sparks your interest, or finally having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Whatever it is, trust yourself, take that leap, and see where it leads.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Robbins' book is filled with incredible stories and practical strategies to help you along the way. And we're here too, cheering you on every step of the way. So keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep pushing yourself to become the best version of you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 5-second rule. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to take action. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep those 5-second countdowns ready. We'll see you on our next deep dive.